I think we have a bunch of people in. Joe, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to chat about the Grand Canyon and specifically the rim to rim to rim. And yeah, share a nice conversation with Dahn and go through some of the features of the onX app as well. Yeah, it should be a good time.
Awesome. I'll start out with a quick intro about myself. Uh, my name is Don Pratt. I work at onX. I work in strategic analytics. I've held many jobs in wilderness settings, from being a guide in the Appalachians and in Sierras, working in Alaska as a dog musher. I was a geography teacher at an international school, and I have about 20 or 25,000 miles of trail under my belt, including the Triple Crown, which is the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm Joe Grant. I live in Durango, Colorado. I've been here for the past 3 years now. Previously was in the Front Range outside of Boulder. I actually grew up in France and came to Durango on an exchange program in college about 20 years ago. And since kind of made it back here full circle, and about 6 hours from the Grand Canyon. So looking to spend quite a bit more time out there every year. And my first time actually going to the canyon, I think I was about 14 or 15. I was coming over from France to visit some family here, and went on a hike down into the depths with my sister. And of course, we went too far, ran out of water, ran out of food, ran into a rattlesnake, and had all the classic sort of Grand Canyon experiences. But immediately it was a sort of very captivating place to me, both visually and of course just like the history, the geology, everything about it I thought was just really, really incredible, and really lived up to its expectations. And since then, I mean, the rim to rim to rim has gained a lot of popularity with runners, hikers, and I've been going back to do double crossings and run other trails, kind of all around the canyon. But some of my most memorable double crossings were actually done at night. The first of which was after a 50-mile race down in northern Arizona called Zane Grey. And I had an unfortunate little snafu during the race and ripped my shoe, and had to drop out 30 miles in, and was pretty bummed. And then instead, on the drive home back to Colorado, I decided I should just stop into the canyon. But it was quite hot at the time, and sort of end of May probably. And so I decided to instead do the double crossing at night. So I rolled in right at sunset to the rim. And really, I think, my at least for me, the Grand Canyon is very much a visual experience at first, or that's what I thought. But then having this experience of running it completely in the dark really changed my mind on all of that. There's a certain aura and feel and atmosphere, and you can really feel like the depth of the canyon in a way that that sort of sight doesn't bring to you during the day. And there's also just all the sounds. It's a lot quieter, obviously, a lot fewer people. I encountered someone looking for scorpions with a little blue light, which I hadn't seen that before. Also some hikers that do an annual trip there every year to just do the double crossing as a hike. And that's their kind of main get together every year, which I thought was super cool. And another night experience that was really awesome was part of doing the Arizona Trail on a mountain bike. And I started on the Mexican border down in southern Utah. And then 680 miles later, found myself at the top of the South Rim, strapping my bike to my pack, because you're allowed to physically have a bicycle in the Grand Canyon. The tires are not allowed to touch the ground. And so you have to carry it across the 21 miles. very difficult, by far the hardest single crossing I've ever done, but also a pretty magical experience, just being kind of so depleted and raw. I think that really opened me up to just a whole range of emotions that's quite special to experience in a place like the canyon. So yeah, we're gonna kind of talk through planning for a rim to rim to rim hike or run. Dahn will talk more about the hiking side, and I'll talk more about the running side, but we'll kind of go back and forth and keep it casual. And yeah, please feel free to add some questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end. Be about half an hour of chatting back and forth.
Love it. Joe's selling himself very short on his accomplishments, but that's in his nature to be humble. Did that night hike feel redemptive after having to DNF from that race?
It really did. I was really tired, but also just kind of it felt like I finished something, and there was this sense of I think I crested like the south rim right at dawn, just as it was sun was rising, and so I did get the last couple hundred feet or so of the canyon in the light, and then so I think it was just a really unique way to experience the canyon, and something that I try to revisit, not necessarily there, but just this idea that engaging all of our senses and not being just drawn to the easiest one, which is in the canyon. It's easy to trip because you're just always like looking up and like, wow, this is so incredible. But so yeah, having that experience was cool.
Incredible. All right, let's jump in, folks. So what's on the docket for us? We're going to do a little intro on the Grand Canyon, tell you a little bit about the rim to rim. We're going to talk about training and logistics for doing a rim to rim to rim hike or a run. And we're going to talk about how to map out that route and then create a plan and then work that plan once you're in the field. And the last part is the Q&A section. So please, again, make sure you're typing in really thoughtful, thought-provoking questions, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can at the end. And the last part, as a treat, we have a bunch of stuff to give away from us at onX, as well as some of Joe's other sponsors, Scarpa and Black Diamond. So stick around till the end because the prizes are pretty sweet. And just as a special thank you for joining us today live, this is exclusively for today's masterclass. We're offering a 14-day extended trial or 30% off an onX Backcountry Premium membership. So thank you so much for being here and coming on and listening to us blather on about what we love. Feel free to just scan that QR code or go to the URL down below. I think Jill, our MC, is going to also paste that URL into the chat. So highly encourage you to get after it. All of the planning that we're going to be doing is going to be in the onX app, and a lot of the premium features are going to be useful for the planning portion of this. So make sure you grab your subscription. All right, let's jump in. This is the introduction to the Grand Canyon. So Joe, do you want me to spiel away or do you want to take the reins?
Either way, I mean, the Grand Canyon formed about 5 or 6 million years ago, and through erosion from the Colorado River. So it's well over a vertical mile deep in terms of how much that erosion is cut into the rock. And as you go down from the rim to the river, you really experience like 2 billion years worth of layers of geology and rock, starting at the top with the youngest rock, which is the Kaibab limestone, which is still 250 million years old. But there's also rock in the Vishnu group that's 1.7 billion years old. So it's a very, very ancient and captivating place from a geologic standpoint. And then maybe you want to, Dahn, talk a little bit, the cultural history, I think started about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, so there have been inhabitants in the Grand Canyon for thousands of years before America was a country. You have the Havasupai tribe, the the Umi tribe, the Uti tribe, the Pueblo people. You have hundreds of people who have made this place their home, but also over 3,000 different species of animals that call the Grand Canyon home. So it's actually not just this like very narrow, slot canyon. It's up to 18 miles wide in some places and almost 300 miles long. So it's quite a unique place. It's considered one of the seven wonders of the world, but it's also enormous and really hard to comprehend. Not just the depth, but also the breadth of the place.
And there was also there's hunting and gathering that took place, but also agriculture. So there's terrace gardens that you could find, and I think that there's also like the Hopi creation story that starts at the confluence of the Little Colorado and the Colorado River. So there's so much history, cultural history, and present in the canyon, and you can obviously still learn and see a lot of that history today. And it's the Havasupai reservation, I think, borders the canyon. There's a 160,000 acre reservation that borders right on the side of the canyon too. So yeah, very, very cool on that front.
As I mentioned, there's tons of wildlife as well. You can see really big mammals like bighorn sheep or elk, and also little ones that are a little bit more dangerous, like the rattlesnake that Joe mentioned. Yeah, it's truly one of the most unique places I've ever been to. So let's talk specifically about the rim to rim to rim. Some things to remember. This is a very long trip. It's not just like take a water bottle and an apple and go hike it or go run it. Depending on the route that you pick, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, it's between 40 and almost 50 miles. And you're going to gain about almost 14,000 feet of elevation, and you're going to lose the same amount. Joe, I know you've done this well over a dozen times. Tell us a little bit about how like a mile is different here than anywhere else.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of scale that is pretty kind of hard to gauge and to, compared to your sort of normal running miles. And I found that every time I go down there, there's always like, oh, is that really a mile? Or maybe the Park Service kind of messed up or the GPS isn't working right. But everything always just feels, I think, a little bit longer. Also a little bit more rugged. Of course, it's the corridor trails that we're talking about here are, very well traveled, but they still are really rugged trails. And there's a lot of exposure to the elements. There's, some technical sections of trail. There's cliff bands. There's potential for rock fall, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely an environment to be sort of alert and aware and also humble to not kind of overestimate. And in general, I try to sort of underestimate my potential in the canyon, and because it's quite easy to be like, oh, sweet, I'll do 20-mile run here, and then go here, and then go there. And then I usually end up doing like one of those objectives on a trip. So continuously, it's a very kind of humbling environment to be a part of.
Yeah. And I saw this stat just recently. There's about one rescue a day in the Grand Canyon. And during the peak months, there's about 300 ranger responses every month. So it's really important to not become one of these statistics, because it usually means something has gone drastically wrong. So I know, Joe, you have this kind of approach that you keep in mind when you're thinking about this. And I know it's included in that humility that you've already shown us, but maybe you can take us through this kind of mind, body, gear approach that you've discussed before.
Yeah, I guess just first, just a little quick tidbit. We're talking specifically here in the running sense. The most traveled route is the South Kaibab Trail to the North Kaibab Trail, which is the shorter of the two options. There's also the Bright Angel Trail that takes you down to the Colorado River, kind of creates this little fork, either the South Kaibab or the Bright Angel. Bright Angel is slightly longer. It's a couple miles longer, and we'll get into more detail about that after, but just wanted to clarify that I'll be speaking more about the South Kaibab option, and Dahn will be kind of talking a little bit about the Bright Angel option too. And potentially there's a way to also do a combination of both and get the best of both worlds. So that's that's a good thing to keep in mind when planning. So in terms of preparation, I think the first thing to consider is that before even setting foot in the canyon, is try and get a mental picture, sort of a visualization of what it looks like. And of course you can do that through some images. Interestingly, the name Kaibab is Ute for mountain lying down, and that to me is very representative of what the canyon is, which is essentially an upside down mountain. So typically, if you're going up a mountain, it starts with quite a bit of effort, and you're very aware of what you've covered, and the return is usually easier. Here, it's really easy to just kind of drop in and start going down, running, and before you know it, you're down at the river, and there's a 5,000 foot climb right behind you to get out of it. So one of the first considerations is to really sort of appreciate how quickly you can get down into the canyon, and just go in without trying to go too fast or too hard, immediately sort of dropping into the canyon. And so that kind of circles back to that sense of scale, and the canyon miles being a little bit different scale. So part of that mental prep is to just toggle it back a little bit and be like, okay, this is only 6 miles down to the river, 5,000 feet, but there's it's canyon miles, and so it's a little bit different. The other thing I do in terms of mental prep is seeing myself and picturing myself actually doing it, and manifesting the goal in my mind before actually going and undertaking the challenge. And that's just a helpful tool to kind of associate myself with that environment and see that I can accomplish it, or at least try to believe that I can, before kind of setting foot in it. Another consideration is for the exposure. So there's exposure to weather, to heat, to cold. Temperatures vary greatly from the rim, where it could be snowing at the top of the rim, and then you could be swimming in the river at the bottom. So it really does vary greatly. So that's another thing that's helpful to prepare mentally, is to know that there might be extreme kind of shifts in conditions, and not be surprised, and be aware that that's happening. The other little tidbit comes from a good friend of mine, Rock Horton, who, when talking about running an ultra, used this analogy of spreading the peanut butter evenly on the slice of bread. So, and it's so true for something like the Grand Canyon, where you really want to gauge the effort, knowing that you have to come back. And something that's quite hard to do, to sort of project and feeling, excited and eager and ready to go at the start. And then as things kind of accumulate, it can get really hard. And so not getting carried away, because truly, in my opinion, the hardest part is that hike out on the return leg back up to the South Rim. That's a real wall at the end of a really big day. So something to keep in mind is just to spread that peanut butter evenly. And then in terms of the body sort of physical preparation, Dahn, do you want to hop in and give a little bit about how you would prepare for a hike down there?
Yeah, I was chomping at the bit a little bit, but the same is true for a multi-day hike as for, or even more so for a run, right? Like, you have to really be cognizant of your energy expenditure and how much you have reserved in the tank, because you are out there, regardless of what's around you. you're in a national park and no one is really going, like, no, you're responsible for your own safety, right? So really be mindful of how much calories are going out and how much are coming in. It's super important for something like this, especially when you're in the Grand Canyon, because it deceptively zaps your energy, and you don't expect it, and you might feel very fit, and you may have like done a lot of training, and we'll talk about what kind of training that might be. But the heat, the exposure, the temperature changes, the elevation gain and loss, all those things are cumulative, and they're not part of the numbers. They're not part of the miles that you might see on your map. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And like the word I keep returning to is having a sense of humility about it.
Yeah, and certainly there's something that both runners and hikers share, is that I think for preparing the body, one of the best tools is to have a strong hike. Even if you're a runner, you want to be a strong hiker first and foremost, because that will serve you well. And it's helpful sometimes to hike early. And so if you're running down the rim to the river, and then the trail starts to go up, even if you have plenty of energy, kind of circles back to that sort of preserving your energy a little bit. It's a great opportunity to hike, and if you've got a good, strong, efficient hike, that will really be helpful. And a lot of us will be hiking out on the return leg anyway. So I always feel like it's better to anticipate that, and to be prepared. The other thing, of course, and with stating the obvious, is that there's a massive amount of downhill running, and with that comes a lot of impact to the quads and to the legs in general. And so having whatever you have in terms of terrain to prepare for that, if it's a long downhill in the mountains and everything, great. But if that's not accessible, stairs, even paved roads, or more traditional things like burpees or squats or those kinds of things, really trying to get the legs conditioned for the downhill as much as possible is super helpful. And then there's also I just think general athleticism serves really well. So often I'm asked if there's ways to cross train that they're useful for running. And in general, I feel like running the more running you do, the better prepared you will be for running. But with the canyon specifically, just because of the nature of the terrain, I think that having that good reserve of energy and general athleticism, whether it's a strong core, or just being able to balance well over time, coming down some of the more technical terrain, is going to be super helpful. So working on all those kind of proprioception and core strength, and that's a really great way to get your body conditioned if you don't have access to steeper and more rugged type of terrain like you'll find in the canyon.
Yeah, if you're backpacking, my go-to is actually running as well. The more you front load your athleticism before your adventure, the more enjoyable it will be and the less suffering you're going to do. It's a lot easier to climb uphill if you've practiced doing that. And I know some people don't have access to hills. They live in very flat parts of the country, and that's okay too. But trying to anticipate the terrain you will be in and train for it is really helpful for when you actually get there. It's a lot easier to hike 20 miles a day if you have done it in the past, as opposed to trying to do it with a pack on in the heat with variable terrain. So the more you can front load, the better time you'll have is usually my go-to piece of advice.
And that those running legs will also serve you well, and getting good running economy will also be really good, because there are some pretty moderate sections in the middle we'll get into a little bit once with the actual map visual. But from Phantom Ranch up to all along the Bright Angel Creek, that's about I think it's about an 8-mile segment there, and it's relatively gradual uphill, nearly flat in sections. And so you'll be doing, that out and back 16 miles. And so that's a section that is easy on the surface, but also potentially a spot where you can kind of pick up a lot of easy miles if you're feeling okay. But if you've burnt too much energy or your quads coming back down from the north rim, then that flatter sort of, more longer, slower section can take a really, really long time. So that's what's, I think, really compelling about a trip like this, is there are a lot of skills and a lot of different strengths that can come into play. So if you're a really strong runner, there will be, a good portion of that that's gonna serve you really well to be able to run those sections efficiently. And if you're a strong hiker, then you'll be able to set up well to be able to trot along, hopefully, and cover some good ground when it's a little bit easier.
Should we briefly talk about gear before planning and visualizing?
Yeah, absolutely. So would you like to start with well, I don't mind, however you want to.
Yeah. So gear's a little bit different when it comes to running versus backpacking. Obviously, you're going to need to carry some form of shelter when you're backpacking, or you may choose, and I've done this in the canyon quite a few times, to actually, if you've checked the weather report and it's looking good, to leave the shelter at home and just carry a sleeping bag. That's cowboy camping, which is really fun to do in the desert Southwest if the weather is good. But you still need to carry certain things that maybe a trail runner wouldn't. So for sure.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say there's also strict permitting, required for overnight stays. So that's just something to keep in mind too.
Definitely. Even if you're cowboy camping, you still need to do so at an established campground within the Grand Canyon. And we'll talk about that permitting a little bit later and where those locations are as well. But that's a nice way to save some weight, especially if you're in the desert. It's not for everyone. I recommend trying it at home before you go out there, because it might be a little unnerving to have, nothing between you and the stars. But it's a great way to lighten the load, because it is quite a long ways. Another important piece of gear, which I'm sure trail runners use as well, is a water filter. It's one of the most essential pieces of gear, because sometimes you are unsure about the quality of water. So having, like a 1 or 2 ounce filter is really helpful in ensuring that you're getting clean water, because it's the thing that you're going to be consuming the most, and it's the weight that you're going to be carrying the most. So you want to not have to carry a lot of water from a source that is good, just to bypass sources that may be questionable. And then the last piece of gear that I would recommend, besides, like your hiking attire and your backpack and all the other goodies, is having some sort of navigation, source of truth. And that's what this webinar is all about. And we'll jump into that right after this, but make sure that you have your offline map downloaded and your route dialed in and knowing where you're going ahead of time, because it'll save you a lot of headaches of trying to figure out your plan in the field, spontaneously. It can be fun and exciting, but it's usually pretty nerve-wracking and anxiety inducing. So I definitely recommend kind of front loading the planning, and we'll talk about that. Plan the work the plan.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics around the water planning, and it is a little different as a runner. Specifically, if you're going down the South Kaibab Trail, there are no water sources on that segment, whereas down the Bright Angel Trail, if you're doing the longer route, there is there's a water source that you won't need a filter at. And so there's a way to kind of connect those water points without ever really having to use the filter. But I do think I would really strongly recommend bringing one as a backup, because there are quite a few water sources along Bright Angel Creek that you can totally dip your bottle, but would certainly be better to filter. Obviously, the Colorado, you can also refill there, but you might get a mouthful of silt with that. So I would probably only do that in an emergency situation. But I bring pretty similar amount of gear. Water would be my first consideration. I do a little safety med kit, usually with a space blanket I bring headlamp with spare batteries. Often I bring a second light. I just don't really want to, be left without light. I also bring a little puffy jacket because we talked about how the conditions can be really change dramatically. And I experienced that a couple weeks ago. Actually, I was out there and it was snowing on the rim, and everyone up there was just kind of bundled up, and it was basically a whiteout. And I ran down to the river and was in shorts and t-shirt, sweating, wishing I had more water. So those are, it's sort of, it can be really surprising how much that varies. So I wouldn't bypass some of those seemingly pointless kind of things, like, oh, why am I going to bring a feather jacket when the temps are going to be 80, 90 degrees down at the bottom. You might be really happy to have it for the last 2 hours hiking out depleted, to the south rim. So those are a few things I'd bring. Another thing would be winter considerations. So the typical season for the canyon is between May and October. And part of the reason for that is that's when most of the water sources open. On the North Rim, for instance, they have a spigot at the top of the rim that they close seasonally. And I think it opens in early May, typically. But the shoulder seasons kind of in that, March, April, October, November, even into the full winter months, are really good times to consider, knowing that you'll have to maybe carry a little bit more water and plan for a little bit more self-reliance, but you might get potentially better conditions. It can also be a bit of a gamble because you could get snowed out or something, but just something to keep in mind. If it is the winter, maybe some spikes, some traction device, some poles can be super helpful. I guess summer and winter. But yeah, those would be the sort of main things that I would bring. Of course, there's a bunch of little tidbits of things that everyone individually, sunglasses, sunscreen, those kinds of things are pretty essential and baked in. One thing, of course, is also food. And the way I plan food, and everyone's a little bit different and has different considerations. But the way I plan food is I usually try to roughly estimate how long the double crossing will take. So in this case, let's say I'm planning, I don't know, I say 10 hours or 12 hours is going to be, the time that I want to take to do the crossing. And so the way I plan is I would take one item, like a bar or some, little gummies or, some sports drink, whatever that is that works for you. And I just take one item per hour. So I'd have at least a minimum of 12 things for my planned, 12-hour crossing. And then I'll usually take maybe a little buffer for that, maybe a sandwich for the North Rim or something, extra. There's also a possibility to buy a little food at Phantom Ranch if it's open. So, I think it closes around 4 o'clock or something. So if you're running back and counting on that Coke to get up the South Rim, it might not happen. So don't count on it, but just a simple little planning tool that has served me well over the years is just to kind of go through that guesstimate, and then bring one item for each hour, and then maybe a little spill over just to be safe, and have a little extra emergency stuff.
And backpacking is a little bit different. You're going to be looking at about you're going to try to be in the 2,000 to 2,500 calorie a day range, and you're looking for very calorie dense food because the caloric density means it's going to be lighter. So if I have something like peanut butter, which is like almost 200 calories per ounce, I have to carry less of it than, let's say, a watermelon to get my caloric intake. So I'm always looking for those like really, really calorie dense food that I also enjoy eating. so I don't have to carry as much weight, because it's all about what's going to be on your back for those, 2, 3, 4 days. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's actually that's a great little tidbit, because having a little fat and protein and not just kind of the hummingbird diet is also, a pretty good thing for runners to have too, of trying to have a balance of those. And knowing, for instance, like if you eat a huge gob of peanut butter at the bottom of the climb, you're going to have to digest and process that as you start to go up. So you might feel a little, bonky and more, tired. And so just kind of figuring out when might be the better time to eat those foods is also something to consider. So I typically eat like a little bit heavier or more dense foods at the top and before running down, as long as it doesn't jostle the stomach too much, and then keep a pretty slow drip intake of sort of sugar water on the uphill to kind of keep things going.
Nice. So someone asked, what do you do about rattlesnakes if you're cowboy camping? And I've never had that problem before. Rattlesnakes generally don't want anything to do with you. And luckily they have a rattle that tells you when they're pissed off when you're around. So you can also, if you're not fully comfortable with a cowboy camping setup, you can use something called a bivy, which is just like kind of a mummy sack that zips and has some mesh. So you're enclosed from the outside, but still, it's a very light kind of like Spartan way of camping. So I just wanted to call that out. Thank you for asking. That's a very reasonable question. Should we jump in to mapping the route?
Let's go.
All right, let's dig in then. So we actually at onX have a couple thousand, I think over 70,000 rich content trails. And one of them is the rim to rim. And these content trails are really helpful at understanding where you're going to go. They're helpful for like discovering what you want to see. And this is the rim to rim, and there's a lot of other rich content trails that exist here. So you can see like the portion of the AZT is here, as well as the South Kaibab and Bright Angel Loop. There's a lot going on in the Grand Canyon, but we're going to focus on the rim to rim. And what's awesome about the rim to rim is, if I can click on it, sorry guys. There we go. Sorry, this is part of the many trails of rich content. So what's awesome about it is you can discover, what elevation gain and loss you can expect, the total mileage. Obviously, this is going to be a double crossing, so you would double it. We also estimate the duration. We talk about when is the best time to go, and if it's a really popular trail, we'll also include a description and some photos. So makes it really easy for discovering trails that you may not be aware of, which is awesome. And we also provide in-depth information about what you can expect, what you might need, such as permits or parking passes. What I love about the Discover card, though, is actually discovering nearby routes. So let's say I'm in the Grand Canyon, I've already done the rim to rim, and I want to still experience that area. I can go to the nearby routes and look at other things nearby. So like the AZT, go through the Arizona Trail, which Joe talked about biking. You can bike it and hike it. The best part about the Discover card, in my opinion, is actually the weather modal. So you can get an idea of what temperatures to expect, if there's precipitation, if there's wind, and you can also get a forecast into the future, which really helps planning with, what kind of temperatures can I expect, and what kind of temperatures should I pack for, which makes things really, really helpful for, future planning. So if you want, Joe, I would love to talk about kind of the aha moment, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the aha moment is visualizing before, we were talking about visualizing the trail, and onX has this awesome feature, which is a 3D map feature, and you can go in beforehand like this, and let's see if Dahn will flip into the mode. There it goes. And there you have the whole relief and the whole canyon kind of revealed, and it's just, I think, a brilliant way to get a visual of what you're about to do and sort of imprint that in your mind. And you can really just kind of, you can see the two trails there that we're talking about, the Bright Angel Trail, and then on the left there, the South Kaibab Trail. And so, yeah, specifically, if you're wanting to run it and do it from the South Kaibab Trail, it's a shuttle only. There's some very limited parking at the top, not actually at the trailhead. It's about half mile away from the trailhead. So something just like to consider right off the bat is, how you're gonna retrieve your vehicle at the end, if you're doing an out and back. And kind of like an interesting thing about the South Kaibab Trail is most of the trails in the canyon going down to the river were originally Native American trails that were further sort of developed by prospectors, and then became part of the national park. But the South Kaibab Trail was actually built by the National Park Service, helped by the Havasupai in the 20s, 1924, I think. And so it was because on the Bright Angel Trail, there was a guy whose name I'm forgetting now, but he charged a $1 fee for hiking down the trail or riding down the trail. And so as an alternative, they created the South Kaibab Trail, which is now the shorter of the two options, being 6.3 miles to the river, as opposed to, is it 7.9 or something? I'm not entirely sure how long the Bright Angel is.
It's almost 2 miles longer. Yeah.
2 miles longer. Yeah.
So actually,
that's
what's really cool is you can actually do this trail as a loop, which is awesome. So if you're feeling like maybe you just want to get down to the Grand Canyon and you don't want to cross, it's a great loop hike to do. But still takes a lot of planning and logistics, where we'll just focus on the rim to rim, but really awesome way to see the South Rim in its glory, and also the Colorado River.
And kind of how, as we mentioned before, one option to do it is to park at Grand Canyon Village, take the shuttle to the South Kaibab Trailhead, run to the North Rim and back, and then take the Bright Angel Trail back up to your vehicle. So that way you get to, it would be only a couple miles longer, and you'd get to kind of experience both trails and also get a water point partway up the Bright Angel Trail, which can be kind of nice on the tail end, and just a cool way if you've only got one opportunity to go and experience it. That way you can get a little bit more, see a little bit more of the trail, which is pretty cool.
If you want, let's talk about. I'm gonna import a GPX of the track, just to show you how it would work. So it's very easy to import content, and we can look at how rim to rim to rim would look in terms of planning. So really easy to import tracks and have them in. This is just one that I've drawn beforehand. It's very easy to draw as well. We have drawing tools right here that you can use to make your routes as you like. But I just went ahead and did that beforehand, just so we can get a visualization of the whole route. So basically, what Joe was saying was we can have two options of where we start. We can either start at the South Kaibab Trailhead or the Bright Angel Trailhead. But with a rim to rim to rim, if you're feeling up to it, you can go all the way to the North Rim on one side and return on the other. So you get the whole experience without sacrificing one of the trails. And I'm always a big proponent of that. I always love to see as much as possible, but to return to what Joe was saying, like, make sure it's within your means. And this is a great kind of like learning lesson for me, to always have a contingency plan. So we know that the South Kaibab Trail is almost 2 miles longer. The Bright Angel Trail is almost 2 miles longer than the South Kaibab. So I'm going to keep this as a contingency plan for my way back. I know that I have an out that's a little bit shorter if I'm really exhausted from doing the double crossing.
Totally. Yeah, and then the rim is at the south rim there is at 7,200 feet. So something that might not, immediately come to mind when thinking of the Grand Canyon is that there is an altitude element to doing the double crossing, where the north rim is 1,000 feet higher. It's just over 8,000 feet, 8,200 feet, I think. And so, there's that upper portion, if you're coming from sea level and you've got the conditioning, it's just good to remember that the going gets a little tougher once the air gets a little more rarefied up top. And it's also sometimes harder to eat. And so just those are kind of little considerations that are helpful, I think, if you're feeling particularly bonky and, having a rough time going up the North Rim, which tends to feel like it goes on a little bit forever, that upper portion. And I think this is pretty common in the canyon in general, is you can kind of always see the rim, but you're not exactly sure what point on the rim you're going to. And there's definitely quite big variances between spots. So it's hard to get like a visual gauge once you're down in the thick of it, of how far you actually have to go up.
And also one thing to keep in mind, for every 1,000 feet of elevation gain, you actually lose about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So you might be experiencing 70-degree temperature at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but once you head up to the North Rim, it might be below freezing.
Definitely, yeah. And that's where those little extra layers and gear can really come in handy. Do we want to do a little bit of a run through of the different water kind of options?
That's exactly what I was going to recommend. So I've already gone ahead and drawn this route ahead of time. And I can even look at that drawn route. It can give me an idea of how long it is and how much elevation gain and loss I can expect. And I can follow it along to here with my elevation chart, which is great because it also shows you a slope aspect. So you can anticipate the kind of climb or descent based on the color coding, which is really, really helpful. So I love drawing my route out before and then seeing what I can expect during the hike, because on a 2D plane, this just looks like it's probably a pretty, chill hike, pretty flat, pretty mild. You're in the canyon, but you don't really realize that you have these two, obviously we know it because it's rim to rim, but we have these two lips that we have to descend and ascend. So really, really recommend drawing out your route beforehand to really kind of visualize the plan that you're undertaking. But yeah, the most important part of this is, where do I get my water? 40 up to 47 miles, depending on how far you go, is a long ways to go. So Joe was really kind and actually shared some waypoints with me beforehand of where water is, and I'll let him speak to it as I pull them up.
Yeah, so a good thing to check before starting any of these kind of adventures down in the canyon too is just the Park Service website for seasonal closures. You can get pretty reliable updates. Certainly, if things are closed, sometimes they open things a little bit earlier than the update occurs. But just it's a really good spot to go and check. And Dahn, I think you can maybe show how we can link to that too directly from the
great
app.
call out. So sometimes we don't know what's going on. What's great about onX is on these waypoints, there are actually really good like supplementary information. So I'll give you an example. This is directly from the NPS website, and it gives you background on what you can expect for this hike. And it has oodles of information that we don't have time to go through, but it tells you, what you can expect, what you should do, how to practice leave no trace, as be a good steward during the hike, what kind of timing for your hiking trips. There's so much great information in here. And we provide it on most waypoints in national parks, which is just awesome. On top of that, we mentioned that, to camp in the Grand Canyon, you need a permit. If one of the big allures of running it is you don't need a permit from the national park if you're only using it as a day use. But if you're planning to overnight, you actually need to have an overnight permit. And what's great about onX, and one of the features I really love, is if you go to certain campgrounds, you can actually visit the website that has the permitting information, and you can actually book your campsite based on where you found it on the map, which is super handy. I love using this when I'm in places that require a backcountry permit.
Sweet. Yeah, and what I would do is I'd use a lot of these tools in the planning phase beforehand, and then I'd save all these maps to be able to use offline once I'm in the canyon. And I might add a few like waypoints for known water sources, just so I know that they're there. Also, maybe some creeks that could flow seasonally. Or just little bits of like, your own personal information or little things to just remind yourself like, oh, here it gets steep and take it easy. It's longer than you think. Or I don't know, whatever little, info can kind of help map that out. And so the main
I'll just jump in. Sorry, Joe. Joe
Yeah.
actually shared this Phantom Ranch waypoint with me before, but I wasn't sure where it was. So this actually elucidates your point really, really well. I wasn't sure exactly where the faucet was, but I had a bunch of waypoints that you gave me for different water sources, including one at Phantom Ranch. And what's really great is if you've been there before, you can actually create this kind of like memory of what you've seen. So I'll just illustrate that with all these waypoints. So here's the Phantom Ranch waypoint. And what I can do is I can actually add a picture to it just by editing and adding a photo. And this is from Joe, so thank you for including it. But this shows me where I can expect that water waypoint. So when I get down to Phantom Ranch, I know that the faucet is right in front of that house there. So it's kind of cool. You can set different icons for what you want the waypoint to look like, depending on what it is. And we have a lot to choose from. And you can also set the color and the name. So I've set all of the waypoints that have water currently running as on for my own planning purposes. And I might even do a little bit of a note here just to let me know what it is. So this is the Phantom Ranch, and I know that the water's on. And I actually want to save this because now I have a sweet picture on it, which is awesome. But some faucets that Joe was mentioning are not working. So actually, Joe was kind enough to compile all that information for me. So thank you so much, Joe. We have an example here of a faucet that's off. And this is at the plateau point. And Joe also pulled the days when it's tentatively going to be turned on. So this is a great planning tool here. Like I can create the waypoint and then write down the information that I need to know when I'm out in the field. So I know that this faucet won't be on until probably May 8th, and that's tentative at best. So I need to call NPS and confirm if I'm going to rely on that water when I'm out in the field.
Yep. And that photo is actually a photo of my mom and uncle, who I did the double crossing with a couple years back for my mom's 60th birthday, which is a good time. So yeah.
Thanks for that photo. It's awesome.
Yeah. And that's also right behind there is the Phantom Ranch little snack store. If it's open, it's a worthy little stop. So yeah, they're going off of basically the known for sure kind of water sources from the national park site. Right from the start that the first 6.3 miles down South Kaibab, there's no water. So it's all downhill. But remember, you want to be kind of running easy and not overdoing it and getting too carried away. And so it's a good time to just, I would just start with a decent amount of water and stay hydrated. And knowing that once you get to Phantom Ranch, which I think ends up being right around the 7-mile mark, because you cross the river and it's about 3/4 of a mile or so past that to the faucet. That's when you'll get your first refill opportunity. So even though it's downhill, and just kind of plan accordingly, based on your pace. And then once you get there, you'll start to run along the Bright Angel Creek, and that's that sort of squiggle there from Phantom Ranch all the way to the Cottonwood Campground, which is 7 miles up the way. And all of that terrain is pretty, it's pretty gradual, nearly flat in spots. And you do kind of parallel the creek pretty closely. And so there are a couple opportunities if you do have a filter and you do need water to refill before you get to the campground. That little yellow squiggle there is the Ribbon Falls waterfall, and that's a cool little side thing to go check out. I think the bridge is currently out, so the Park Service is sort of discouraging people to go actually to the falls, but hike at your own risk. And but that's also of course another water source. So this whole kind of middle corridor section there's quite a lot of water. And if you're carrying a filter, there are options. If you're just going from open potable source to another, your next source will be at Cottonwood's campground.
Yeah. So if I was hiking this area, I would probably just add a waypoint here and say potential for a seasonal stream. So I wouldn't really rely on it. I may make it like a yellow water source and just say, Ribbons Falls is nearby. So I might, if there's water running, I can fill up here and I have my filter and I can filter it, but I'm not going to rely on this. This is just kind of a bonus. And it might be a nice place to take a break. It might be a nice place to fill up some water and relax by the creek. But I'm going to plan that out because Joe just told me about it. Thank you, Joe. It's awesome beta, but I'm not going to rely on it. I'm just going to put it on my map for future reference.
And so then once you get to that Cottonwood campground, there's once you pass that, the next water source is at the Manzanita Ranger Station, which is that little blue X there up in the canyon. And this is kind of a little bit of a shift in terms of the terrain here. So you've been cruising along this quite mellow, gradual terrain. And as you turn up Roaring Springs Canyon and start to ascend to the North Rim, there's the trail will pass right by the little ranger station there, and there's a spigot to fill. Now, if you're doing this on the shoulder season, the water at the North Rim will be closed. And so unless it's after, early May, I think it was May 8th that they said that it would open this year. So something to consider here is that out and back from that last water point to the top of the North Rim is pretty significant. I think it's 7 miles still to the rim from there, and then that back. And the trail goes along these pretty exposed cliff bands. So and you gain altitude. So you might be needing to drink a little more. Also coming back down, you might not be able to run as fast because of the exposure. And so those are just things to keep in mind. When I actually did it with my mom, as I mentioned earlier, it was in November and we didn't have that North Rim water open. And so we tried to plan, and fill up what we needed. But actually it's funny, when we got to the North Rim, my mom was like, "Where's the water?" And I said, "I've been telling you that there's no water at the top." And it just goes to show, the fatigue and the accumulation of altitude, and you might not be thinking, super straight in the moment. So that's another reason to do some really good planning ahead of time and just have those waypoints and those little bits of information so that when you get to those spots, what's coming and kind of how to plan for that.
Yeah, it's a great call out, Joe. And one thing that I like to do also, which is kind of a departure from what we've been talking about, but if I'm expecting a lot of exposure, especially to the sun, I'm actually going to flip on to snow mode and look at the slope aspect of the area that I'm going to be in. And what this does is it's mostly for skiers and snowboarders when they're backcountry and they're looking for, potentially dangerous terrain. But it's also really helpful for people who are backpacking because it shows you what you can expect in terms of sun exposure on a face of a climb. So for instance, towards the North Rim, I can see that there's very limited sun exposure because it's a north facing side of the rim. So I know that it's not going to be as hot as it can potentially be as other parts of this hike. So I love looking at the slope aspect when I can expect a big climb, because I know if I should do it maybe towards the end of the day or maybe early in the morning. So I'm avoiding like the hottest part of the day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes me think of another little thing that I use, and while I'm preparing, but also while I'm in the canyon, is to break things up into segments, and so for it to not feel overwhelming. And so it's nice to be able to plan the different. Okay, I'm doing the South Kaibab Trail, then I get to the river, and that's one segment, and then sort of learn about what's going on that trail, what you're seeing, all of those things, and then have these, sort of different portions laid out. And then as you're kind of running and executing the plan, it gives just more confidence, and also more intermediary goals to work towards. If it feels hard or overwhelming or too difficult, it's just like, well, just make it to the rim and then kind of assess from there, and then make it back down to the ranch, and, et cetera, et cetera.
So I think we've done a good job of planning the work. I think now we need to work the plan. We need to do the second part, which is, so we've been doing all the planning, and now let's pretend we're doing the doing. So we have these great waypoints, we have our track, and we know what we can expect. The last and probably most important part that I would suggest is taking this offline. So all this information, all this data is awesome, but it's only available to us when we're online. So it's very important. And one of the key features of onX is to create a new offline map of all this great stuff that we just spent a lot of time planning out. So what I'll do is I'll actually create an offline map and pick the resolution I want. And I can even name it. This is going to be my rim to rim to rim trail. And I'm going to absolutely send it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll save that. And that's actually going to sync with my account. So when I go to my onX account on mobile, I can actually have all of this data offline and ready for me to use. And I'm actually going to demonstrate that now. So I will just start screen sharing very quickly here. And you can see this is my mobile phone. And here's my onX account. And you can see all the stuff that I just created has synced automatically to my phone, which is really, really helpful. And I can go to my offline maps and see that I have my offline map here downloaded. And what I always like to do to make sure that I've actually downloaded the offline map, I actually take my onX app into offline map mode, and then make sure that I have access to all the rich content that I downloaded. So I'm making sure that my trail is there. I can see my topo lines. I still have my water waypoints, which are super important. And that way I know that everything is ready for me when I go to the Grand Canyon and I lose service, when it's too late to do the planning. I also saw someone in the chat was talking about how good is onX at tracking you while you are actually doing the hike. So onX actually also has a tracking feature where you can start tracking your actual walk. So you can create this breadcrumb. So you can either plan it or you can actually create it by yourself. So track the way you came and the way back. Which makes it really easy to relive that moment, right? Or to see if it matches up to what you created at home. And it's very, very accurate. And it also measures not only your distance, but the time and the speed that you're moving. So if you're hoping to trail run it, it's really cool to see like what your top speed was on that super downhill part.
Nice. And then another thing that's nice too about the offline maps, which I like a lot, is just that I can kind of save battery on my phone and, do a lot of the prep and planning at home. And then when I get to the canyon, really just kind of be there and dig into that and have a really good, backup for anything that I might need, or when I'm stopping just to check, see where I'm at or what's coming up. But I like to be able to, stay in the moment and out there when I'm there, and have this reliable, awesome backup to be able to navigate if I need it.
This was epic. Thank you, Joe. I think we should open it up to some Q&A if that's all right with you. just before we do that, I would love to just talk a little bit about the last part of this, which is our giveaway. So as a thank you for joining us and listening to us talk about something that we absolutely love to do, we're offering you guys some sweet gear. We have over 50, or sorry, we have 50 bandanas that we're giving away. They're sweet. They're awesome for backpacking because they're made out of this like super nice material that I actually use as a towel. I use it as a handkerchief. I use it to cover my ears if it's sunny out. It's like a million different uses. It's awesome for hikers. I highly recommend it. It gets really nasty really quick though, so make sure you wash it. Please go to this website. The URL will be in the chat as well. And you can also win some sweet black diamond gear like this headlamp, which is super good for a rim to rim to rim, hydration pack, shorts, hats, shoes from Scarpa. There's a lot of really cool stuff. So please go claim some of it. You can scan the QR code there, or you can go to the URL in the chat. And then the last part is let's answer some of your questions. You guys have been very, very patient. I'm going to open up some of the Q&A. Is there anything you want to say as kind of like a final thought encapsulated while I pull up some questions?
I mean, I think we really covered a lot, and yeah, I'm happy to well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have question wise, and yeah, we'll just get into those.
What are some special considerations to take into account if you're doing this solo?
Yeah, so obviously, if you're in a group, you have the support and ability to kind of bounce things off of your group members. You can rely on your group members too. But I've mentioned this like track with my mom and uncle. In that situation, when things got pretty hard and pretty cold, hiking back up the South Rim on the way back, I realized that there's not that much that I could actually do. Like, they weren't in critical condition, but things are pretty rough, so considering that even when you are part of a group, being self-reliant, do your research, kind of be an active team member and not just relying on other people's expertise and skill. So that's one thing I think that's valuable, both when you're by yourself and in a group. Is to, by yourself, I think the biggest thing I do is just to toggle things back just a little bit. So I always try to keep that safety net of, if I need to get myself out. I think the psychological aspect is a little bit different, where when you're in an organized event or with a bunch of friends, you can kind of maybe push a little bit harder because you do feel like there is that support group around you. But when you're by yourself, roll an ankle, or something goes wrong, then you're going to have to kind of reckon with your own sort of skill set and knowledge and ability to sort of manage that. So part of it is just staying relaxed, staying not pushing too hard until maybe the very end bit. But I always try to kind of keep the first at least 2/3 well within my comfort zone, and then once I'm feeling like, okay, things are going pretty well, then I can push a little bit more.
And if you're backpacking, the thing I recommend the most these days, after a bit more age and wisdom in the backcountry, is to carry a satellite communicator, whatever your choice may be, whether it's Garmin or Zoleo. There's a bunch out there. They're not that expensive, and they're not really for you. They're for your loved ones, to make sure that they can check in with you, to make sure that you're okay, to alleviate their fears. I spent a lot of time in the backcountry not using them, and it's really kind of selfish not to do it. So carry one of those. They're not a get out of jail free card. A helicopter is not going to come pick you up if you're tired or out of water, but they're really good at communicating your whereabouts and how you're doing, and making sure that others know that you're safe. So that would be my consideration if you're going solo. Another question. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say, and they're really small too. And so, that's totally a really good tool to have.
Another question was, on average, how wide is the trail?
Well, I kind of assumed naively when I was doing the double crossing with, or the single crossing with my bike on my back, that I'd be able to carry it horizontally and not vertically. And let's just say that it doesn't go horizontally. So that gives you an idea. It's less than a bike width in a lot of spots, and a lot of pretty exposed spots too. So that's just something to to consider. Is there are sections where if you're afraid of heights, or exposure is something that you deal with, then there are sections where the trail is relatively narrow, not so narrow that you would fall off, but you're definitely on a pretty narrow trail for the most part.
Nice. Yeah, it varies, but remember that you're in a national park, so someone has like created this trail, so it's not like off trail or tiny little narrow exposed bit of traversing. You're generally in good hands when you're in a national park, generally.
And especially on the corridor trails, these are really well traveled, very established routes. So even when there is exposure, it is the trails are really well built. It's not actually that true if you do go into like some of the more remote sections. Even a trail a little bit up the way on the South Rim called the New Hants Trail, very different feel to it. Much more technical, feels like more of a goat path than an actual established hiking trail in some sections. So there's the corridor trails, and those ones are pretty well, really well taken care of. And then the other ones are still pretty wild. So just keep that in mind if you plan other trips down there.
Great call out. What is the typical time needed for R2R2R, like for a double?
It varies greatly. I mean, the record is Jim Walmsley, and he did it in I think just under 6 hours. So you can do it extremely fast. I think the average runner is probably somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, maybe 14. Somewhere in that. I mean, I know that's a really broad range, but if you're looking, it really just kind of depends on your abilities. But yeah, 6 hours. And then hiking wise, if you can maintain 2-3 miles an hour for the whole thing, it's I'm not sure what's the math on that, Don. I'm not very good at math.
I would say you could probably do it comfortably in 2 nights, 3 days. That's going to be like a really nice trip. Some people even take 4 days. And if you have a lot of experience and you're feeling very fit, I think like an overnight, so a 2-day trip is a good effort. You're going to be tired, but very doable.
Yep.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more. I know we're a little bit over, so thank you, Joe, for sticking around. This is a really good question and an easy answer. So any recommendations about why to start from one side versus the other? Why start from the south versus the north? Super easy. The north side is super remote, kind of inaccessible, a little colder, very sparse. The south side is much easier to access. Anything to add there, Joe?
No, it comes down to an access. Access. And there's, all the amenities. There's Tucson, which is a little town right outside of the national park there on the south side, where there are hotels, food, and then there's Grand Canyon Village. So you're much more kind of feel more like you're in the park, so to speak, like in terms of the developed side of things on the South Rim. And then the North Rim, which is wonderful, has a much more remote kind of wild character to it. So it's a great place to go spend some time, but especially if you're doing like a single crossing, that's why it's like actually logistically pretty difficult, because I think it's at least a 4-hour drive to get from the South Rim to the North Rim. So whoever's going to go pick you up is going to be doing some driving. So yeah, typically the South Rim is the easiest logistically to start from.
Nice. Thank you, Joe. Well, I think we've kind of run out of time here, but it's a lot of great information. It makes me want to try to run it, even though I know I'll probably feel like I hit a refrigerator. Um, Again, I want to just give everyone an opportunity who joined us and made it through this masterclass with us. We're giving you a 30% discount. Just scan that code or go to that URL, and you will have 30% off a 1-year membership for premium backcountry. It's a great app. I use it in the field a lot, and it's great for planning and it's great for doing, as you can see. If you have any questions at all, we have a wonderful customer support group that I think they can solve any problem you can come up with. So please use that resource. I'm always hitting them up like, hey, how do I download an offline map in, whatever question you have. I had some really esoteric questions. They'll answer it. They're great. Nate has been doing yeoman's duty in the chat as well. So thank you, Nate. But most importantly, just get out there and get after it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks all for tuning in. Thanks to onX for hosting this. And hope you all enjoyed it and got some good info, and see you in the canyon.
Love it. If you want to connect or learn more, please feel free to go to our website. We have amazing articles and tutorials. We also have YouTube demos. As I mentioned, our customer support center is incredible. They're some of the nicest people I've ever met. And watch out for some more of these onX Backcountry Masterclasses.
Cheers.
Thank you, folks.